Peace, family, and greetings. This is Murray Forman coming to you direct from the forest in New Hampshire, United States. It's a real pleasure to be here and to join with you all. And as we get going here, I want to give thanks to the organizers here, to Mary, to Sergey, to Bobish, to Robert, people I'm just meeting right now. And if my family is watching in Caracas, salud a toda la familia y Samawa, te amo con todo mi corazón. Anyways, let's get this started. One of the things that I'm looking at here is, celebrating hip hop at 50, and it's an opportunity in a lot of ways to think about an awful lot about the culture. I should preface this by saying I'm primarily looking at this from an American perspective through an American lens. But Hip Hop at 50 opens the opportunity for people in every global location to have their own reflections based on the culture as it's formed and evolved in their own context. And here we go. So I asked the question, I start with, so what the hell are we celebrating when we say hip hop at 50, and we pull out our celebratory horns and tune any single thing. And it means a lot of different things to different people at different moments in its evolution. And so, I have these different terms, a scene, which often suggests something quite localized, something that jumped off or maybe has a local character. A culture, which suggests something much wider and more sustained and enduring. And when we certainly talk about hip-hop culture at 50, I think this is what we're talking about, which leads me into thinking about this as a global movement. And my previous comment about every nation having their formation, their culture, their kind of history and trajectory is really significant here. But at the same time, I was just explaining this to somebody recently that I could go anywhere in the world, and I know when I'm walking into a hip-hop environment, I can tell by the graffiti on the wall, the style that people are wearing, what's on the soundtrack, the way people move to what they're feeling and hearing. And right away, you can see that this is something that's taken hold on a global scale. This idea of a way of being and a sensibility, that's a harder one to isolate, but it does come down to this notion of affect, our emotional connection to whatever these aspects and elements of hip hop are, and how we let them inhabit us, how they integrate with our sense of self, and then also how we express ourselves in and through a hip hop framework and lens on an everyday level, right? To be hip hop. I am hip-hop, to adopt an expression that was common in the 90s, certainly. And then at this 50th anniversary, the notion of simple nostalgia. Are we looking back longingly and yearningly for this thing that began 50 years ago? And what does it mean to have that? Or certain moments in our own evolution, our own life, where we have this hip-hop moment that is so important to us. And often nostalgia gets a bad rap. It gets disparaged and regarded as sort of a pathetic yearning for the past. And I see it as something very positive. It's a way sometimes of navigating and negotiating the present. And certainly these aren't isolated. They all sort of sit together. So narrating the culture at 50. And I don't know the extent in other places that hip hop's 50th anniversary has been noticed, acknowledged, celebrated. But here in the US, it really, really has been. It's all over the media, radio, television, certainly the internet, interviews with pioneers and veterans and just fans. It's everywhere. And it gives an opportunity from a scholar's perspective, an academic perspective, to really think about how does the story get told at this benchmark, this golden anniversary of the culture. And on the one hand, there's this aspect of facts and history, right? How is the past recuperated? How is it pulled forward? What is the historical narrative, the telling of the story based in, right? And so I think about this in terms of a truth, and some of these terms will come up later in the presentation. How do we corroborate a truth? that my view on something or my experience of something, even if I'm cohabiting and experiencing it with a crowd, with a lot of other people, that doesn't mean the truth or the element that I take away is going to exactly align with everybody else's. There's a lot of subjectivity wrapped up into that. Now, you can't just make up facts and have your own personal facts, but how we feel them and then how we express them, that really is individualized. And so I talk about this in terms of corroboration and community consensus, that in fact, each and every one of us individually has an understanding or a sense of what it means to celebrate hip hop at 50 years, right? And we put it in the context of our own experiences and our own existence and our own knowledge base. And yet we also test that knowledge and go to others to get a sense of like, is that how it was for you? Does that feel right? Did that really happen the way I imagine or the way I believe or in the way I know it did, right? And so there really is this community and communal aspect that comes into the narrativization of hip hop at 50 years. Who's authorized to tell the story? And certainly at this celebratory juncture, we're hearing from a lot of the pioneers, the founders, the architects, who in fact, haven't really been around that much, that haven't been pulled into the narrative except in hip hop circles, right? The mainstream media didn't go looking for the original DJs from the 1970s on a regular basis, but they certainly have this year. And I think that becomes interesting. They were there, they had a hand in creating this thing. It's absolutely legitimate and necessary to go to them, as long as they're still here, to seek their story and their understanding of what it means to grow up and grow old in the culture. I raised the issue of lore here, and maybe another way of conceiving it might almost be the mythologies of hip hop. Or the symbolic components, right? The romanticized or idealized aspects of hip hop. And on the one hand, when we talk about, say, a myth, right, we suggest that it's not based in fact, it's not necessarily true, but it's been embellished and it's been expanded upon. And, there's a romantic, maybe, series of dimensions that have been attached to something that has a kernel of truth in it. And then things get dispensed, thrown away because it's not true. But those myths, those romanticized, idealized aspects, the lore, is absolutely crucial to the culture. Sometimes that mythology and that lore can be maybe things that people wish was still in hip hop, or maybe that it wasn't fully there for them, but they think it's a valuable part to import into hip hop. Or to take away, to export from hip hop. So I really do put some credibility in the idea of lore, the myths, the romantic ideals of hip hop in these narratives that come out. And there are many of those, and it becomes quite a fun process to listen to what people are saying in this period of 50 years celebration. Facts, history, truth, corroboration. We're awash in evidence, and I'll come back to this when I talk about hip-hop archives, but we're awash in evidence, and it's gained an awful lot of importance, certainly at this point of 50 years. Those original photos of the individuals who created hip-hop, or of jams or graffiti artists, the documentation, oral histories, going and interviewing them. We're hearing all of that, seeing all of that in our media today in these celebratory gestures. And we can go to hip-hop oriented media, things that are really focused and emphasize hip-hop as a culture and are sort of made for those who are on the inside. But also the mainstream media have documented hip-hop, whether in favorable or unfavorable ways, since its beginnings, really, or the very early stages. And so all of this is out there. And so we don't have to imagine or simply go to the individuals, but we can go to a whole range of evidence to find those facts and develop that historical narrative. And then this is just maybe a little caveat or side thing, again, speaking from a hip-hop studies perspective, the emphasis on doing the knowledge. And I've seen in a number of interviews people who haven't quite done the knowledge, or they're not hip-hop founded and grounded, and maybe they've done a little bit of background and somebody's put something in front of them, but they aren't telling the story in a way that aligns with that corroboration, the community consensus. An example of this would be, I heard on American National Public Radio just the other day, reference to Notorious B.I.G. as a pioneer. He really, comes in the early 1990s, and hip hop begins much earlier than that. Is he a pioneer? Or did he pioneer a particular aspect or key, crucial dimension of hip hop? That's a different kind of argument. So doing the knowledge and applying absolute rigor to the culture and our understanding of it, I think is essential. It benefits the culture, and those of us who work in the knowledge industries, it absolutely benefits, our status in hip hop. So hip hop's ground zero, and this is the screensaver in my computer as well. It's absolutely something that I hold near and dear. And unlike a lot of other cultural and artistic movements, hip hop seems to be rather unique, that you can really point to a place and say, the vestiges of this culture began on this site, in this geographical location, this social space. We don't know exactly where the blues began, right? We can have general sense of a region in the country. Where did rock and roll begin and who were the first people? It's not as clear. Whereas hip hop points to 1520 Sedgwick. This has got some factual and historical basis. It's also evolved as an element of the lore, and it's celebrated for that. So this is a public housing project building in the Bronx. We can also talk about a historical moment. If we have that spatial, anchoring, here's a temporal anchoring. And this is original flyer for, one of the most famous parties in the culture. And certainly it's come up an awful lot in these 50th anniversary celebratory articles and coverage. But there's just so much information packed into this. First of all, this is a DJ Kool Herc party, and Herc will come up in a couple of contexts here. So we get a sense of who's hosting the party, who's the dominant DJ. 1520 Sedgwick Avenue, there's the address. I just showed you a picture of it. The date, August 11th, 1973. Now, again, it's like you can't point to a lot of other cultural movements and say this is when it jumped off, this is when it began. Hip hop seems to have this moment in time that you can point to. And the historians use this as a sort of a baseline from which they then build that narrative. We can see here that it had a commercial component. Now, some of the mythology and the romantic discussions often suggest that hip hop had an earlier pre-commercial period, which was beautiful and more pure and authentic. But here's the so-called first party, and it has an admission charge, 25 cents for the ladies, 50 cents for the fellas, right? And Kool Herc's parents also sold drinks and snacks in a small concession at the party. So they too are generating some revenue from this event. And then we have the time of year. It's August. School's still out. It's a back to school jam. And the story is at the bottom, these special guests, Cindy C. Well, that's Herc's sister, Cindy Campbell. And the story is that she wanted to generate or raise some money to go and buy some new back to school clothes as a high school student. And so this is basically a fundraiser so that she can get some cool back to school wear, right? And so this also is a reminder that these are kids, these are teenagers doing something for themselves, putting on their own party to generate revenue for their style, for their fashion. So this really gives us a ton of information from a historical perspective. A lot of people haven't really seen images of the rec room where this party happened. We have the time, we have the place, but here's a more specific place. Here's the rec room, right? And one of the jokes in terms of the narrativization of hip hop at 50 and up to that point is if everybody who says they were at the party was there, they'd have to have had it in an arena or a large theater or something, whereas the scale of this room, as I've said, is about 12 meters by 12 meters that holds approximately 300 people. right? So we can use that to corroborate the math, how much maybe they generated in funds and revenue from the event, but also we get a sense that it was small. This was very much a tiny kind of event held in the apartment building where Herc and his sister Cindy and their family lived. So again, these kind of specifics come into view, and the 50th anniversary gives us a context to explore them. So let's meet some of the individuals. I've been referring to Cool Herc. Then there he is on the far right without the hat on. And he, he's the guy who threw that what everybody agrees and accepts as the first party. On the far left, in the striped shirt, is Grandmaster Flash, the founder of Flash and the Furious Five, also a famous DJ from the mid to late 1970s when he really started. And in the middle, we have Afrika Bambaataa. They both came a little bit after Herc. They're just a little bit younger, but they followed in his footsteps as DJs. He was the first to begin to put on these jams that we associate with hip hop. But they were his contemporaries in many ways. So they get kind of put together in terms of these pioneers and founding fathers. Now, I put these photos together. They're from this, obviously from the same photo session. The photo without any language, any words on the left, it's kind of raw. And it tells us something, but it doesn't give us all the details. You look at the other one, the Source magazine cover. This is from November 1993, so 20 years after that party in that basement that Herc put on. And you can see that the culture has evolved. It's got a language and a discourse that's already kind of taken shape around it. So they're looking at hip-hop history 20 years later. And the reference to true school, right? That this isn't old school, this isn't new school, which are temporal kind of poles, that this is true school. Again, speaking to that authenticity and that authentication and the authority. Who's authorized to speak the history, to tell the story? And these guys, having been there in this earliest period, and there were others, they weren't the only ones, but they are among the most prominent, they are unquestionably qualified to tell the story. And then it may not come clear to you to see it on your screens, but the cover refers to them as the founding fathers from an old school rap session, right? And this idea of founding fathers, well, that's a terminology that often gets associated with the founding of a nation, right? In America and the U.S., that's George Washington and the people who signed the original Declaration of Independence. And so, hip hop as well has put these guys on a pedestal in a way. And this is, in 1993. So here we are all these years later, and they still come up in the conversations. Bambaataa less so for various complex and unsavory reasons, but certainly Flash and Herc have been cited, many, many times in the past several months. This may be really common to many or most of you if you're the least bit familiar with hip hop, so I won't go through it. I won't belabor it. But it's gone out of a little bit out of sync here. But the four major elements: DJing, MCing or rapping, b-boying, b-girling or breaking, and aerosol art, graffiti. And these are regarded as the kind of the four main elements. And they don't all emerge at that 1973 party, but as the culture evolved, as the parties got more, larger and drew more and more people, young kids in the Bronx, young black kids, often middle class and poor kids, who were involved in these other elements came together. And so you get this convergence of creative and expressive forms that begin to take shape and give us this thing that we celebrate at 50 called hip hop. These other elements, beatboxing, so rhythmic embodied form of bringing the beat without other technologies. And then the emphasis on street knowledge, street language, slang, street fashion, how you looking, fresh dressed and styling, and street entrepreneurialism, hustling, doing business, grinding. And in those cases, the emphasis on the street is important, I think. That streets are regarded as undisciplined places, right? They're not formal. They're not institutionally aligned necessarily. They're wild, they're threatening, they're risky, they're dangerous, they're fun. And I think this is also a reminder that, hip hop, is made by these young folks for themselves, and it emerges outside of infrastructure, outside of these institutional and adult-oriented support systems. And then I add the fifth element, knowledge, that this has been a facet of hip hop right from its beginning. Afrika Bambaataa was the founder and initial leader of the Universal Zulu Nation, and they inscribed knowledge right away as being as important as DJing, MCing, b-boying, b-girling, and graffiti. Knowledge. And it's knowledge in a number of facets. On the one hand, it's knowledge of self. Do your self-reflective and spiritual self-awareness work. Knowledge of Black culture and Latino culture. Knowledge of expressive forms, political moments and movements of the culture, of a people. Knowledge of hip-hop itself, right? How did hip-hop form? And as it evolved, it was sort of... there was a responsibility to do that knowledge and carry that knowledge forward if you're going to align yourself with hip hop. And then it even include things like, basic knowledge of, your rights, your civic rights. If you're pulled over by the police, what can you and can't you do in that context? So knowledge has always been a crucial factor. And so as a hip hop scholar and academic, this is where I get in. The element that I work in, having tried and failed at some of the other ones, hip-hop knowledge is where I fit in. And these symbolic forms, come up in all kinds of ways. So all these years later, and so, in 1973 or even 1983, an image of a spray can is really at some point just a spray can, right? And yet, all these years later, to see an image, if somebody has a t-shirt with a spray can, it's almost assumed that the reference would take us to hip hop and graffiti, right? Why else would you have an image of a spray can on your shirt? Similarly with turntables, right? That if in an earlier stage the turntable was conceived as a reception device, to have a t-shirt that has Technics, a particular brand, and to have the image of the turntable would maybe suggest that you either are a DJ or you somehow subscribe to hip hop in a way. So this is the symbolic kind of transference of value that's come along in all these 50-odd years. And on the right, we have the images from a U.S. Postal Service issue of stamps that the U.S. government several years ago acknowledged and recognized hip-hop as a crucial part of American culture. So once delegitimized and subordinated and frankly almost outlawed, it's been brought into the mainstream and adopted by the highest levels of U.S. officialdom, if you will. And so, I love the idea of unknowing or, not really kind of focused older people licking the stamp, putting it on a letter or maybe paying taxes or something and putting it in the mail, and hip hop going out, much the same way that graffiti used to be on the trains and ride across the cities. Hip hop is now moving through the Postal Service. Now, I had that image earlier of 1520 Sedgwick, and and I also made reference to photographic evidence, and I think it's really important to take a look at some of these things to tell us, to show what they can tell us about that past. And the picture on the right of the guys around with the fan and the table with the turntables has shown up quite a bit in this 50-year celebration. The other one, I haven't really seen it. So the one on the left is the Cold Crush Brothers performing in 1981. But it gives us all kinds of information about this locale and early sites. First of all, it's in a club, and you can see graffiti murals on the wall in the back. 1981 is important, though, that at this point, there's a DJ in the back, DJ Charlie Chase, with the Cold Crush, but we see the MCs, the rappers in the front. And there's no breakers that we can see in this image, but you see an audience standing and wrapped and watching and enjoying the performance. Before the MC really became the centerpiece, it was the DJs. It was people like Herc Flash and Bambaataa and others, right? As the MCs gained a certain kind of profile and prominence, the DJs sort of receded into the back, and audiences sort of stood and watched it as a performance. There wasn't the same sort of enticement to hit the floor and dance and break and uprock and whatever. So the timing and the image tell us certain things about this past. The image from 1984 is in the park. And I think it's great because it's so informal. You can see the setup is pretty rudimentary. You can see people milling in the background, probably waiting for them to start the jam. It looks like they're still setting up. What we don't see in this picture is their speakers. I'd love to see the scale and size of what their sound system looks like. But this also gives a sense of that openness, that outdoorness. And some of the veterans and the pioneers from this period, audience members and the like, have talked about being at the park or being out on the streets and hearing the boom of the bass. And it was like a beacon. It was calling them to the jam. And they'd cross the park, cross the streets, come, and they'd join their fellow young neighbors, and it'd be on. So this idea of the outdoor space, and well, that's pavement. It looks like the ball courts. At the same time, these are in park areas where there are trees, there are grasses, right? And so this sort of gives us a sense of, something almost bucolic in the middle of the gritty city. Now, another thing that comes up, and this is one of the powerful discourses of hip-hop, and a lot of it I've heard in this 50-year celebration. I personally push back about it a little bit, as do some others, but it's a strong part of the language, the discourse, the lore, if you will, of the culture. So I don't want to dispense with it. I just want to maybe give it its due and put it into a proper context. I use the term bricolage. It's an anthropologist. And what it has to do is like making do, using something, whatever you have at your disposal, to your benefit, right? And this is highly evident in his research as an anthropologist to look at tribal cultures. But British cultural studies theorists also looked at it in terms of subcultures, putting these things together that maybe don't fit together to create something new, or taking things that had one usage and transforming it into something with a complete different usage, right? I put the image here of a Gulf 55-gallon oil drum, right? And we can think about this as being something maybe once discarded, industrial discard and debris, say in Trinidad, in the country of Trinidad. And what we have on the right is a steel pan, a tin drum, a steel drum, manufactured out of the surface of that drum, right? And it's transformed from something that carries oil and then has been discarded into a beautiful instrument that actually sometimes they have full steel pan orchestras that are just glorious sounding, right? So this is an example of bricolage. One way we can think about it in hip hop, a simple one that also has a rhythmic component, is the way the turntable was transformed. That in 1972, it was, and even in 73 primarily, in early part, it was mostly a reception device. It was used to play music, to listen to music, right? With Herc, Flash, Bambaataa, Theodore, the L Brothers, many, many others later, that it became a rhythmic instrument in its own right. It wasn't just used to listen to music, it was made to provide and present beats, to mix and cut and use it in a really sophisticated manner that the companies that manufactured them and marketed them never imagined. And so rather than something from nothing, I turn to Grandmaster Kaz, who says, hip-hop didn't invent anything. Hip-hop reinvented everything. And I think that's an important kind of way of framing it. This also corresponds with the DIY, do-it-yourself ethos, which, if you don't have infrastructure, nobody's providing, resources or options for you as a young person in the Bronx in the mid to early 1970s, you better do it for yourself, right? Make your own party, provide your own music, and do it on the cheap if you can. And this is something that was also evident in the same general time period in punk culture. So we can think about this as not exactly something from nothing, but do it yourself with the few resources or the few objects that you've got available. And again, to counter this idea of nothing, we can think about all the affiliations, the neighborhood support, crews, the mutual and communal dynamic of families and the support networks that are highly institutional but not officially recognized or structured, not necessarily organized but informal, right? But they are absolutely something. And we saw this in a great deal in the 50th anniversary celebrations and discourses as well. People talking about tapping into their father's stereo and their mother's record collection, and who was the person who showed them what to do, who was the mentor that helped them learn their skills. This is definitely something from something. So there's another myth that prevails, this reality and myth of hip-hop as resistance, as rebellion, as contestation. And again, the mythology is that hip-hop naturally or innately embodies this. And it requires some sort of adjustment. The earliest pioneers, people like Herc, were absolutely explicit. They said, I was just doing this for fun, right? There was no precedent, so it wasn't like we could look and say, this is where it's going. That didn't exist. They were the first ones out there, right? And so they were doing it for fun, to make the party. And as Herc has said, I did it to make people happy. He didn't mind making a little money on it. He didn't mind a little bit of the local fame and prestige. He and others of the fellas in particular didn't mind the attention they got from the ladies, right? But this is a long way from being a force of rebellion and resistance, right? But we maybe think about, just young black people having fun can look like a lot of things to different people. So maybe there's an inherent resistance that is built into that, right? So age, young people in the face of age, older people, adults, authorities who maybe look askance and maybe don't really like what they're doing or don't understand it and ridicule it. Race, these are mostly black folks and Latino folks, right? So within a white supremacist hegemony and dominated society, to be black and do anything in a public context is to gain attention and maybe unwanted attention. The class component, most of these folks are, like I say, from middle class or lower class families and communities. And so this idea of in a class system, they're subordinated already. Social location, the ghetto, right? And then ideology and social values. They're already throwing a middle finger to mainstream society. And so they're maybe got a chip on their shoulder, which is to say they're suspicious, skeptical, and really uncaring about what a mainstream society wants or desires of them. And then we can think about this idea of how does hip-hop amplify identity and culture and presence. And this idea of, you have to struggle to make yourself known, seen, recognized in a big city like New York, certainly in the 70s. So putting up a tag on the wall with your name or being a dope DJ or MC or having some really great dance moves that you can show off your skills, hip-hop really did provide some sort of mechanism to express one's identity. Outside of the norms of, say, scholastic and school performance and other sort of more socially normative modes of expression. And then within this, the resistance that, I mentioned adult kind of dislike. So the idea of affront, distaste, anger, retribution, policy, and law, right? That the issue of is rap and hip hop even music coming from certain classically and Western oriented music aficionados and educators. Distaste for the whole look, style, sound, feel of the culture that's emerging. This idea of policy, right? So in law, noise policy. Is that too loud? And should it be played in public? And when should it be shut down? Do they have a permit to be out there in the park, right? Or graffiti as an illegal damage of property, right? And putting into place all kinds of regulations and laws to go after and stop graffiti. So there is resistance built in, but we don't want to just kind of spontaneously say hip hop is resistant, has always been rebellious. That requires context. And then even as we maybe accept this idea of rebellion, resistance, and the like, hip-hop has proven to be amazingly co-opted easily commodified and sold. And here are a couple of contemporary examples of this that show the extent. And this is certainly something that's been ongoing. Remember that card, the flyer from 1973, 25 cents for the ladies, 50 cents for the fellas. We might say that this is the culmination of some of those tendencies. So we have, one-time former hardcore gangster rapper Ice-T collaborating with the breakfast cereal Cheerios to promote health and healthy breakfast, right? Now, in this case, I'd be 100% sure, because of the scale of Ice-T and his reputation, and also of Cheerios, that this was a signed contract and it was an agreement. The other two, I'm not so sure. The small circles, that might be hard to see. This is 87-cent ramen noodles. You put them in your microwave and heat up lunch, featuring Master P, Boosie, and E40. And then below we see rap icon Snoop Dogg selling potato chips. These are low rent, no name products, and it's harder to say if in fact they signed off on this and are being paid for the use of their images and on these products. But it speaks to a history of hip hop appropriation, and something that it's come up a lot in these discussions in the 50s celebration. That what is the gradual process of hip hop being mainstreamed, being pulled over to mainstream commercial and corporate interests. So, is it appropriation? Is it exploitation? Or is it just another revenue stream for artists who have every right to be paid for their artistry and for their creativity and for their work, right? People in other cultural forms usually don't have a real problem with being remunerated for their effort, for their labor. And hip hop certainly has sort of walked that line. Getting paid is a big part of the discourse, but selling out is also part of the discourse. And you want to sort of thread that needle very carefully. So here's an example, the notorious B.I.G., the king of New York, meets the king of beers, Budweiser, one of the more popular and top-selling beers in the country. And the company goes to great lengths to suggest that this is artistic, trying to be tasteful in how they've introduced or appropriated Biggie's image, custom art design. And then they also make it very clear that they're doing this with the support and with the in collaboration with the Christopher Wallace estate. So Biggie's family and the people who preserve his legacy, and also who market and license his image and his identity in some way. So this is another thing that we see is these kind of collaborations between mainstream corporate entities and the artists over the years. So I'll ask Robert if you could maybe play the clip that I presented to you. So, this is a really kind of interesting example of an exploitative and non-collaborative ad campaign. Heineken did a few hip-hop oriented ads. And I would say maybe the only two things they got right about that ad is, one, the last line at the end of it, it's all about the beer, because it's certainly not all about hip-hop at all. And then maybe the idea that scratching came about serendipitously, by an accident. So here's Grand Wizard Theodore. He's the inventor of the scratch technique. He's 60 years old. He's around. You can talk to him about this. And the lore, which is basically corroborated by others, say that he invented the scratch at about 14 or 15 years old, I think. And he was in his mother's house in the apartment. And he was fooling around on his brother's turntables. And she came to the door and told him to turn it down. And while she told him, he had his hand on the record and was just sliding it back and forth. And it made that now widely recognized shuka shuka sound that we associate with the scratch. He heard that, and by accident, and he said, I wonder what that is. I wonder what I can do with that. And that's how he developed and devised the scratch. It has nothing to do with an older middle-aged guy in a club spilling beer on a turntable, right? But this story is there. These guys are there. This is their legacy. And so, as Theodore says, if you've been able to read this quote, he says that this is a disservice to the culture, and it also undermines his legitimacy and his claim to fame, his reputation. And it does a disservice for future generations who may not know and see something like that and just assume that it's true because it shows up on TV or on the internet. Another example, so specifically around 50 years of hip-hop, Sprite, celebrating, or as I reinvent the term, celebrating 50 years of hip-hop. And they've also developed a campaign oriented around the 50-year anniversary and hip-hop. Their claim is a little different than Heineken's, though. As they note in this text here, they have been involved in marketing their product in tandem with hip-hop. They've brought hip-hop artists and icons like Nas and others, and for this campaign they brought in Rakim and Nas again, and Lato. They brought them in, and so they've kind of tried to do something in a way that does connect with hip-hop, the spirit of hip-hop. It's still commercial. We might say it has an appropriative mechanism, but at least they've tried to evolve with the culture. So this is not the same as maybe some of those other examples. It represents something a little bit different. And in a way, this becomes the brand of hip hop in the view of some. Now, I'm winding down and getting towards the end here, and I just want to take a moment to talk about hip hop's archival turn. At 50, this is, I think, a significant occurrence and turn of events. That as anything that lasts and endures, you have a lot of paraphernalia, material objects, documents, memorabilia. And the question is, what do you do with it, right? Some of it is in the garage. Some of it is, stored in a wet, damp basement. Some of it is in your mother's attic, and she's going to throw it away when you move out, or, when she no longer knows what to do. And this has become something urgent that hip-hop heads are identifying. On the lower left, Hip Hop Archives, the book. I've co-edited this with Mark Campbell in Toronto. And we're very proud to have Sergey Ivanov of Moscow included in the book, detailing the archival and educational collaborations between Russia's library systems and hip-hop heads. But we've got 17 authors from 9 different countries talking about their best practices and how they preserve hip-hop. Sometimes just a b-boy who's got things in his bedroom closet and what he's doing to kind of bring that out and make it available somehow, all the way up to the Smithsonian Institute or the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, these major, well-funded and large-scale institutions. So a couple of examples: Mass Hip Hop Archive, the Massachusetts Hip Hop Archive in Boston. The Cornell University Hip Hop Collection, which is really the gold standard at an Ivy League university, no less. Smithsonian's Anthology of Hip Hop, that's the largest museum and archival institution in the country, funded by the federal government. And then on the top there we have Nas at Harvard University, another Ivy League institution that has its own hip hop archive. And they introduced the Nasir Jones Hip-Hop Fellowship. And if I can, kind of pat myself on the back, I'm very proud to have been one of the inaugural hip-hop fellows at Harvard. And as Biggie said, never thought hip-hop would take it this far. But these archives are really important to the continuation of the culture, 50 years and beyond. So the pioneers are still here. They're with us. Coming back to our original 3 that I had on an earlier screen: Grandmaster Flash, Bambaataa, Kool Herc. This is how old they are now. They're still here. And on the one hand, still can be immobile, rigid, inflexible, not moving, right? Dead wood, if you will. Fossils. They are not that, right? All of them, except to some extent Bambaataa, still have rather robust professional careers, right? The other thing, though, is stillness is about that exceptional capacity to endure, to keep it moving. They, in fact, are still here. They're still among us. They're still rocking the ones and twos. They're very much still carrying hip hop forward. And so this is, again, at 50, the celebration, in part, we want to keep in mind that this is not ancient history, that these guys, in fact, are still very much here in their mid to late 80s, carrying on the traditions. So, kind of final word, Grandmaster Kaz. He suggests that at his age, he says that this was at 55. I talked to him a few years ago. He's now 62. That it doesn't feel like he's that age. He feels like, we're still connected to our youth, our youthful practices. But hip hop doesn't identify or define who they are. Maybe the way it's still, the way it did when they were, in their teens and 20s. He's grandparent now. And this is where a lot of his identity comes from. His kids or his grandkids don't necessarily know or care that much about him being a pioneer. He's grandpa. And that's important to keep in mind and perspective. And then also, he's looking forward, right? He's not just looking to the past of hip hop. He's saying, how do I make sure that not just my legacy, but our cultural legacy continues, is carried forward so that future generations know what hip hop is and where it came from and how it got here. And I think this has been one of the great achievements of the 50th anniversary, that a lot of people who maybe didn't know where hip hop came from. They have a better sense of the history and culture. And so, 1520 Sedgwick. It's the building itself has been committed to the historical register. It's recognized as a historical site. They've put up the signage. They've introduced all kinds of special events and special days that acknowledge the founding of hip hop. It's been completely legitimated and legitimized. And Kool Herc, now 68, started when he was 18 in the rec room at Sedgwick Avenue, having no idea what would become of the culture, no idea that his reputation would still be tagged and pegged to that anniversary, to that moment. So 50 years later, there is something to celebrate. There's a lot of ways to approach it, to look at it, but hip hop at 50. Happy birthday, y'all. Peace. And I'd like to thank the American Center in Moscow for bringing me, inviting me in here to share some of this with you, and I look forward to any questions you might have in mind.
Hi to everybody, my name is Sergey, and today I will be moderating question and answers. First of all, I would like to thank you, Murray, for the so insightful and nice presentation. It really raises a lot of questions to my mind that is really interesting for me about bricolage, for instance. It's really corresponding with my work that I've been doing while I've been writing my dissertation. But I'm gonna present here also our co-speakers. Today we're having another session just after your presentation. We see here already Anton. Yeah, nice to see you, man.
Nice to see you guys. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you.
And Renee John Sandy. Hey, bro.
How you doing?
But first of all,
ATL up in there.
Oh yeah. But first of all, let's.
Oh yeah.
But first of all, guys, I would like to switch to the question. Meanwhile, we have some from our audience. Been looking for your presentation, Murray. So I'm gonna shortly just sound the questions. Okay.
Yeah.
So the first question: do you think that modern hip hop artists lack an appreciation for the history of hip hop? Is it important that they understand the genre history if they intend to contribute to it, or is it putting aside the history and moving forward an essential part of the genre evolution?
Yeah, it's a question that us older hip hop heads, I think, have to contend with quite a bit, and it has come up around this 50th anniversary. A lot of people sort of saying, "You must learn," to use a KRS line, right? But I feel like that kind of sort of almost has a reverse ageist perspective sometimes. The older guys wagging their fingers, at the young guys saying, you got to know this. It's important to you. It's important to the culture. You shouldn't be doing something that you don't have a foundational knowledge in. And I get that. I'm not sure I fully disagree with it. But I think one of the things about it is, each and every one of us can go back and say, okay, when I was 18, what did I know? And what the hell didn't I know, right? And I think the list of what I didn't know was much bigger than it is now. I still don't know a lot about a lot of things, obviously, but you have a whole lifetime to do that knowledge. To go to an archive, to go online and look at some of those early battles, those b-boys, those are graffiti artists, to look at that stuff. And so I think, just because they don't know it at a young age, and maybe they're already in the game, they're getting paid, they're touring, they're already fully ensconced maybe as professional entertainers or whatever it might be, that doesn't mean that they, over the course of the years, they won't come to that knowledge, right? And so I think it's important they know. I don't think it's a breaking, something that end all and sort of, breaks anything if they don't. I think it's incumbent on us as older guys to just sort of gently say that this is still there. So when I point to the pioneers, people think, oh, they must all be dead now. They must be in the ground. It's like, nah, they're actually right there. I got Herc on my phone right here, And so, I think this is an important thing. And I think the other thing too is that past, because of the beauty of the internet, all that history is there. It hasn't, it doesn't go away. It's accumulated. Mark Anthony Neal refers to black ephemera and the way the internet is its own kind of archive that we are actively curating. And so, all the past is there. Plus we have these young guys who are doing their thing. Hip hop, I think, has never been more full and more rich, perhaps, than it is right now.
Yeah, appreciate, Murray. Totally agree with you. So going a little bit forward to our next session, maybe I will sound out just a few next questions, and then we can go forward with our speakers that I already see here. Hi, Bobish. So if everybody okay with this, I can sound up like the second question, okay? I was interested to hear about Cindy Campbell's role in the original DJ Kool Herc party. There has always been a lot of discussion about women's role in hip-hop and issue of misogyny with the genre. From your perspective, how have this issue evolved over the years?
Yeah, it's interesting that I hadn't really heard it to the same extent as I did during these 50-year celebration, but Herc and others have referred to Cindy Campbell as hip-hop's first lady, right? To my knowledge, she never was an MC or DJ or breaker or anything like that. I don't know if she performed in the elements, but there's no question she was there right at the beginning. And she's done a great deal to help nurture his career and his reputation, and to advance the culture as well. So I think this has been important because she, those in the hip hop knew who she was, but she's sort of fallen away from that narrative I refer to. So the 50th anniversary has been a context to bring her back in. But I also think there's been a lot more coverage about that very thing, that women have been, kind of subordinated or erased from a lot of the origin stories and from a lot of the evolution. And this gave an opportunity to write them back in. And so there's been specials on women in the culture, what their contribution was, who was first and who did what. In other words, let's identify people like Shah Rock and Debbie D, forgetting all the names of that period, who were in fact pioneers, female pioneers of the culture. Pebbly Pooh, Sweet Tea, right? The list goes on and on. And so this has been an opportunity to kind of bring their voices in ways that maybe haven't been there in a lot of the narratives, a lot of the telling over the intervening 45 or 50 years. And then I think the other thing is that, a lot of the coming back to the first question, a lot of the younger women today, or even people not quite so young, it's like, Cardi B and Nicki Minaj and the like, they often will point to somebody like, say, Missy Elliott as being crucial to them, or Salt and Peppa, right? They come much, much later. So I think this has helped us to have this continuum. working it backwards, reverse engineering. So let's go back from contemporary artists to Missy Elliott to Salt and Pepper and MC Light and Latifah, and then let's go back to Shah Rock and Debbie D, you know, and these earlier individuals. And so we do get a sense of women, but it takes a different kind of work to do it. There's that rigor, do that work.
Yeah, I appreciate Murray. I'm just remembering Tricia Rose, also Black Noise book. As I remember right, she also has a kind of a passage of that questioning how was you know, in rap lyrics of that all that misogynistic, you know, stuff appearing, but at the same time girls are also like MCs appearing, and what is an attitude. Okay, let's go for the next question. Maybe we can
If I
rise
can
it
just
up.
just throw one thing in terms of, you mentioned Trisha Rose, and in terms of hip hop, while women were sort of marginalized in various ways and excluded, you know, sexism, misogyny, they're like definitely part of, unfortunate part of the culture and its evolution. In terms of hip hop studies, women are highly represented and doing some of the most important and essential work. And Trisha Rose, you know, I think is the pioneer in that regard. 1994, her book Black Noise. But Gwendolyn Poe, you know, Cheryl Keys, any number of these women, right up to our co-editor of the upcoming That's the Joint, the next edition of the Hip Hop Studies Reader. We have Regina Bradley joining us. And so women have been part of hip hop studies in crucial and undeniable ways. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So let's go forward for the next question. How has radio played role in shaping hip hop over the years? I find it interesting how influential hip hop radio web shows, Breakfast Club, Hot 97, Sway in the Morning, continue to be in spite of the fact that radio has become largely irrelevant when it comes to the popularity of other genres of music in US.
Is this me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to just name check two people. There's a guy named John Klaas. I think it's Klaes. And he's written a book about early kind of community radio and the way hip hop emerged in the earliest stages with, you know, Magic Mike and you know, Marley Marl, Mr. Magic, Marley Marl, you know, Red Alert. And the community and campus stations, which are so important. And then Amy Coddington has a new book coming out on how hip hop became pop radio through the 80s. So he's looking at the 70s and early 80s. She's looking at, or at the early 80s, and she's looking at the mid to late 80s. So it's absolutely important. And I think one of the places that radio still is relevant is campus and community radio. You know, that they can play a more free form, you know, range of genres. They don't have to just play the pop hits and that sort of thing. So radio was super important. However, satellite radio, I'm thinking here of Sirius. I've, you know, kind of regularly got it set in my vehicle to LL Cool J Rock the Bells, right? Or Hip Hop Nation. Or on Spotify, we have, you know, things like, you know, Rap Caviar for the contemporary stuff, or, you know, 90s classics. So while the platforms have changed, I think, you know, the ways of accessing it are crucial. YouTube. So we can go back to those hits. Radio as a communal thing, though, really has dissipated. Instead of everybody tuning in at a particular time to hear this particular show with this DJ, and you know he's going to play the best jams, right? That's disappeared, and something does get lost in terms of that shared component, right? Now we all walk around with our individualized playlists and, you know, with our headphones in and that sort of thing. So the communal and shared aspect, I think, is probably the biggest damage.
Mm-hmm. Appreciate. One more book that coming to my mind regarding that radio stuff and music is One Night DJ Saved My Life.
Right.
So
Yep.
it's also like reflecting this theme. Okay, and we have the very last question before we start our session. Excuses for the crew waiting for our next session. So I will sum it up. Like, some people tend to argue that other than a handful of figures like Kendrick Lamar, mainstream rap has lost its political edge and has veered into glorification of capitalism. With this in mind, I found the part of your presentation that questioned the notion of older hip-hop was inherently political, revolutionary, very interesting. With this in mind, do you think that some of the people who are disillusioned with the current state of politics in hip-hop are looking at the past with rose-tinted glasses, or has the genre become less political as its audience has gotten larger and more driven by the preferences of middle to upper class white listeners?
That's an amazing question, and there's a lot of dimensions and nuances to it. Yeah, I think there is this sort of, this, when I refer to nostalgia, there is a nostalgia of, nostalgic component of yearning for this period. Maybe, we think of Public Enemy, Paris, a little bit later, the coup, the Afro-nationalist work of X-Clan and that sort of thing. And people do sometimes look back to that period and say, oh, hip-hop was much more political and had a cause and really was trying to move the dial in terms of social movement and political progress, right? Some aspects of social justice and truths and rights and those sort of things. And I don't think the nostalgia of that is a negative thing. I think it's important to go back and reflect on that and say, why did that mean something to me then? And how do we maybe recuperate and carry some of that forward? Somebody like Kendrick is a smart dude. He knows exactly how he fits into that and how he carries that tradition or that character forward. On the other hand, we haven't lost that political component. If anything, it comes back to like the previous question about commercial radio, commercial platforms and areas that they've never been particularly welcoming of hardcore politics, but the current platforms, with the internet and kind of much more free form. In fact, there's a great deal of opportunities and places where you can go to hear hard political commentary. Material that really is connected and aligned with political movements outside of hip-hop, Black Lives Matter and various other things, right? And you can find these artists, so people like Tef Poe, or somebody who's a friend and fellow traveler and comrade of ours, Mike Crenshaw from Portland, Oregon, right? Their material's out there. It's not going to show up in the standard and traditional media necessarily. You have to work for it, you have to look for it a little bit more, but it's never been easier to find. And you can put together your own playlist, and you can have politics after culture, after religion, after social justice, insight, one after the other, if you so desire, and you can share that with people through your playlist share options. So, it's true that a lot of the younger folks really aren't thinking in that context, and yet a lot of what we call underground, not aligned necessarily with money-making commercial aspects. They haven't given up one bit of ground. They remain every bit as critical as hip-hop has ever been. And again, this is another point of optimism for me that you can still find this stuff, and perhaps there's even more of it because there's so many people out there doing hip-hop now that maybe weren't 30, 40 years ago.
Appreciate Murray for this broad answer. That's really interesting question. And I also facing with it sometime when I'm doing my lectures here in Russia, because that's we also having a kind of political situation right now. A lot of rappers that are covering this or that themes, and that's also ways coming out the questions like this. They're also like tough and interesting at the same time. So guys, we're just moving to our next session. Appreciate Murin so much for your lecture, for your presentation. It was really insightful, really covering a wide range of themes, and I think it's a good promise maybe to make another online with you, maybe to broaden it a little bit more, to have it like a more relaxed discussion on the broad themes.
Thank you, and I know that you guys are doing the good work and have been doing that good work over there. And that word build the culture and keep it moving. Any opportunity to build with you, I will say yes.
Appreciate. Many thanks for your participation. One more time, I'm gonna advertise our book that's gonna be issued shortly worldwide, as I get it right. We have it like electronic version, and it will be also hardcover, hip hop and archives. You're welcome to search it online and order, I guess. So it's a big thing to have it issued. So we're moving forward to our next session. And one more time, I'm going to present our co-speakers. First, René Johnson, the welcome bro right from Brazil. Maybe you can just say a few words about yourself.
Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Rene John Sandy. I'm currently located in Uberlândia, Brazil, which is in the state of Minas Gerais, but I'm originally from New York City, born and raised, families from Trinidad and Tobago, and I am the co-founder and executive director of the Hip Hop Love Foundation, in which educates and empower youth globally. We connect youth globally through doing workshops based off the pillars of hip hop, sports, and arts, and using technology and connecting us. And we've done it in 4 different continents. We're blessed to connect with Sergey in the United States, and somebody invited to do some master classes and workshops in Russia a couple of times, which has been amazing. And I've been in the music industry, involved with it since I guess I was 16 years old, going promotional parties in New York City, to doing artist management with Forman, DJ Head, DJ for Eminem, Shabam Sadiq, and many others, and doing college radio promotions and marketing, branding as a consultant. So that's pretty much the skinny that I've been around. And so I've been around hip hop in its evolution, growing up with it in Harlem, New York, seeing the evolution of from graffiti to breakdancing to MCing, from going to clubs and seeing just how things have evolved. And I've also created a company called Spit Kicker that was a urban lifestyle company that I did with rest in peace, Dave Jolliker, Plug 2 from De La Soul, and Plug 1, Pasta Noose. And we did a big tour with De La, Tyler Kweli, Mos Def, Pharoah Monch, Biz Markie, rest in peace as well, and Common Sense. So that's pretty much my skinny within the hip hop industry.
Yeah, appreciate Renee. Our next co-speaker, Lev Bobish. Could you present yourself just a little bit, just a few words about what you're doing?
Hi everyone, Bobish here. Yes, originally from St. Petersburg, Russia. Since 2020 based on Tenerife Island, El Puertito. Yes, originally started with the element of breaking, b-boying, but then expanded to pretty much all the other elements. And some of my favorites are DJing and the knowledge. And one interesting topic I rarely touch is hip-hop translation that I was doing a lot in my life. Translated a lot of speakers, a lot of hip-hop pioneers from the US, including Crazy Legs, Mr. Wiggles. Yes, and we have even translated Alien Ness' book, The Art of Battle, for V1 Project, but then at some point there was some problem with copyrights, so people couldn't actually publish it in Russian at the end of the day. But yes, also a big story in my life, hip-hop translation. And as of recent, I'm a lot into alternative event organization, smaller event organization, and organizing events with alternative judging concepts, more democratic judging concepts where, for example, everyone who is taking part in the jam can vote for the best dancer. So my current passion is into this type of innovation. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate Bobish, and one more speaker, Anton. So could you say just a few words about yourself? As far as I know, you're also dealing with the breaking culture and you have a great experience also. So could you share with us?
Yeah, of course. Once again, hi everyone. Glad to see you guys. Thanks for having me here. My name is Anton. I'm original from St. Petersburg. That's my hometown. I was born and raised here. I'm in breakdance for more than, I think, 23 years ago. And maybe at the beginning, we started relatively started with Lev Babish, and I know him pretty much well. So once again, thanks, and glad to see you here, brother. So breaking for me, it's one of the biggest important part of my life. Definitely, it's nice. It's part of my soul, and for me, it's a little bit kind of religion. And I'm out of the big stage, but maybe I'm on my local. I don't know, amateur, and even if I out of the biggest competitions, and kind of anything, I don't know, events. I'm on class like 2 times per week, and kind of like that.
Okay, appreciate Anton. So today we're having amazing online session dedicated also to the 50 years celebration of hip hop culture worldwide and in Russia particularly, because we're having 3 of us more or less connected to the Russian hip hop culture. And Rene could say, I think, for like the whole world, as he's dealing a lot with international artists. That's an amazing combination, I guess. And today we're gonna speak about inspiration of hip hop and inspiration of American hip hop going worldwide, covering different genres, different artistic stuff. My name is Sergey. Also, I'm now like grandpa. I'm also dealing with hip hop culture as a lecturer. I'm dealing with the knowledge element, also working like Murray, like Professor Murray, with some institutional stuff like universities. At the same time, I'm still digging in hip hop culture in sense of rap music, production, and a little bit dance also. So I'm welcoming everybody to join our session. If you have some vital question, I'm asking you to type it in where you're looking at us, like in social media, and I will sound it also during our session. But making a bridge from the previous speaker, from Murray Forman, I would like also to know your visions of questions like the first question I've been sounding about the modern hip hop artists and their like lack of knowledge, a lack of desire to know the basics, the fathers of hip hop. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit more about this. To my mind, that's a very broad question, but I'm facing it very often when I've been asked by different people dealing with hip hop or just outside the culture. But that's interesting for me to know and maybe to start our conversation about this, the pillars of knowledge and the fathers. So maybe Rene, you can just say a few words about it. We don't hear you. Uh-huh.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
I think it comes more from like, in certain regions and cultures of like learning more about the pillars of hip hop and like how it's not integrated as much into the hip hop culture in certain levels. I think some of that has to do with economics and how economics has played a big role within the growth and elevation of hip hop. Like if you like, for example, like in America, when you're looking at the celebration of the 50th anniversary, a lot of it is evolved around the MC. A lot of it's concert shows, with MCs. There's not a lot of things that are like immensely integrating, per se, breakdancing or graffiti or things of that nature. I mean, you have some things maybe within the hip hop museum here and there a little bit, but sprinkles of it, but not a lot. So I think it's how hip hop has evolved more when it's come to economics, like more of it has come to like rhyming, performances and things of that nature, creating albums, and where that's been the forefront of how like a lot of money's been made within hip hop. So I think that's where there's been a little bit of a loss of translation when it comes to, like the other elements and knowledge of self and things like that when it comes to hip hop, because money's not a negative thing, but it can influence things negatively at some point, or you can forget to get into the traditions. And I also feel like within the gatekeepers of hip hop, like some of our forefront, there's a little bit of a disconnect when it comes down to the generations. Like, hip hop wasn't supposed to make it this far from, the post, from Biggie, but like, there's a generational gap between like what, some of the people, are nice, like the Baby and things, people like, Little Dirk, and like from now to, looking at Melly Mel to KRS-One and things of that nature. So there's a little loss of translation within that. It's not this, but I do feel like in other countries, it's a little different, where those things are not per se lost per se. And also, we also have to look at it where hip hop is global, and really embrace that, and people like, there are a lot of artists that are bigger than some of the forefront artists,
Yeah, appreciate Renette. So for this so broad answer. So maybe I will read it to Bobish also.
I think sometimes it's just about, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, sometimes it's all about waiting up. So if I look at myself, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, oh, I was so ignorant. I thought I invented all the moves. I'm doing everything cool. I'm here, I'm there. Yes, but the more I go with the culture, the more I continue evolving with this. I feel like I'm, becoming smaller and smaller as I go. Yes, so I'm like getting more to the phase of student. So I think probably with a lot of the commercial nowadays stuff, it's just about waiting up. Once people make their share, make their profit that they wanted, maybe, let's hope so, a lot of them, they'll try to connect the dots and start, saying that, oh, okay, this is the sample I got from there. This is the inspiration I got from there. This is the people from the block who I have to support. So maybe it's just about time that is going to help this issue, as it helped, for example, as it helped my mind to, start recovering a little bit from this, ego trip that I'm still recovering from. And I guess it's probably impossible to completely recover from ego trip.
Yeah, thank you, Bobish. So Anton, it's your turn. If you
All
have
right,
something to
sorry. Can you repeat the question? I a little bit missed that.
So we're discussing the first question we've been sounding from audience to Murray about modern hip-hop artists, the lack of appreciation for the history of the hip-hop.
Yep.
And we already started to discuss a little bit more about the influence of the business stuff. And okay.
Yep. Unfortunately, currently, I agree with that, because many of modern artists, I think they, unfortunately, they might know the history, the essence, maybe the key points and the crucial points of origins of hip hop. Maybe like if you see the advertisement in election of Murray, even like about the beer. And that happened in 1982, and back in the days, like even in early 90s, that's happened. And what about the current days? Unfortunately, we encountered a lot of, maybe not really a lot, but often I think kind of disrespect to the culture from the modern artist, and kind of like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate so much. So maybe going forward with the question, we can switch to the inspiration, right? And to remember some concrete names that inspired you during your career in hip hop, in what you're doing, in your business, in your road. So maybe something of an old school, or where you faced hip hop for the first time, or it could be whatever. So maybe Bobish, you can go on forward.
All right. Yes, I'll touch on one of my earliest inspirations in terms of thinking and breaking, not just doing moves, but also thinking. That was the quote from a b-boy from New York City, from b-boy Campbell. and that sounds like breakdancers may have dynamic moves, but b-boys, they have dynamic characters. And back then that really flipped my mind and made me start thinking that this is way deeper, and that there is a whole different level of what we're doing here. Later on, that quote connected with a lot of philosophy, namely Erich Fromm, and his work about Existenzweise des Seins and des Habens. So basically, the two spheres of being. One sphere is about having things. So basically, when we talk about having moves, it means that we want to control them. We want to be able to do the moves, execute the moves all the time. We want to get the titles. We want to win the awards. This is all about having. And this is about dynamic moves. On the other hand, we have dynamic character, which is, if we look at Erich Fromm's theory, that would be categorized as the sphere of being, and that is completely different spectrum, because there is nothing much that you can capture and not too much that you can own. Dynamic character, what is that? It's more of a quality, it's more of a feeling, it's more of a flow of style. It's not something that you can record or take a picture of. Like, how do you take a picture of or a video of dynamic style? It's all the time different. You can't even record it. People may have rumors about it. They may say, oh, that person is cool, but this is mostly about your local fame. So this is something of a superior quality in hip hop, having that dynamic character. But this is so hard to grasp, so hard to describe, and impossible to own or obtain and capture, have it in a cage. So that was back in 2004, 5, I'd say. I heard that quote from B-Boy Campbell from New York City, and that really kept me digging deeper and deeper into this philosophy of having and philosophy of being, which is pretty cool and interesting. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Bobish, for so profound answer. I also reminiscence when I first time opened up the Zulu Nation's web page, and with that full new world of Cosmo world with different aliens and different planets, and it was really huge and interesting, and it was so amazing to discover. So Renee, maybe you can tell us about your experience on that side.
Sure. My first experience, I would say, definitely was Sugar Hill Gang. My cousin actually got a set of 1200s, the DJ, and he would scratch that. He'd be like, and play that record all the time. So that was something for me. Like, that was the introductory, really, on the rap side of it. Now, where I lived in Harlem, I lived very close to 106 in Park, which a lot of people know as a Black entertainment television TV show that had a lot of different guests. But 106 in Park actually is an area which is called the Graffiti Hall of Fame. And that's where a lot of graffiti writers used to come and do these like just dope pieces. And, even to this day, it's still there. People do that. They just did something, a tribute for most Carlos Murray 139. Unfortunately, his son Leo passed away, and they did a big tribute for his son there. So on the graffiti level, that's where I got my influence on learning, about the hip hop culture. I could say for more so the culture in itself, just real quick, was De La Soul, the Jungle Brothers, Native Tongues, like that, and KRS-One. KRS-One on the knowledge side with hip hop. Also Public Enemy, just on a level of kind of the knowledge itself, same with KRS. But De La Soul, Native Tongues is more so like where you could see hip hop on the level where everyone could relate to it. Everybody could be that person. You could be a nerd, you could be a hard rock, you could be, a thug, you can be anything, and everyone could relate to the music. So that was pretty dope to me. So that I always took Native Tongue was something dear to my heart, and being able to work with them in my career was definitely a blessing.
Yeah, appreciate Renee. I also remember in De La Soul when I was searching for the jazz rap, I was I was digging a lot of jazz music. Primarily, I was playing in the jazz band, and then through the influence of the jazz rap, I was also digging in deep in the history of hip hop and music.
Right.
That's interesting. The sound that you're sounding, De La Soul name, Anton. So I'm redirecting also
Yep.
this question for you. What was your inspiration when you first faced hip hop culture?
Yep. What about me? I think, like many b-boys from the late 90s and the early 2000s in Russia, and I was involved in the culture, in the breakdance, from power moves, from breakdance, because they are more, I don't know, cool and significant. And I saw many b-boys, and I thought, I want to be like these guys. I want to make these coolest power moves. And I think when we got some videotapes back in the days, as far as you remember, we don't have any internet access. Many of us even didn't have any computers, so we have videotapes. And I think we got some Battle of the Year tape, like 95 and 99. And I saw the Rock Force crew, and they did many cool power tricks. They have a lot of style, really, and cool power moves. And at the first of my, I don't know, way in breakdance, I got a lot of inspiration from the Rock Force crew. And maybe a few years later, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3, I have known about the style elements and Remind, and maybe a few years later he told, and I know the quote, that foundation in breakdancing is freedom. I don't know, and this quote is a little bit blowing my mind, because breakdance, it's not only about the power moves, it's the way you moving, the way you dancing, the way you express yourself, and the way you create, the way you're thinking. And I think the freedom of express yourself, it's the crucial, it's the one of the most important thing in breakdance for me personally, obviously.
Yeah, appreciate, Anton. It's really broad theme of the influence of one people, of one artist to another, from one country to another, and how hip hop was spreading all over the world, from United States particularly to Europe, to some other countries like Russia. And I remember when we've been bringing Carlos Mayer 139, Rene, you should remember him, to Russia, and we've been talking about some early Russian futurist movement. And I remember that he got an article somewhere in the internet blog, and it was the name hip hop in Russia before hip hop emergence in the United States, and it was a huge conversation with him about it. But it's interesting to trace those influences back and forth, how it goes, and those, I would also say, philosophies and those ideas from hip hop that were also migrating here and there. So the basic philosophy of the hip hop culture, if someone asks, I would say peace, love, unity, and having fun. It's also all about the knowledge. It's all about Kairos book, The Gospel of Hip Hop, his famous book where he starts to elaborate about philosophy and spirituality. It's also connected with the world of Africa Bambata, I guess. Maybe Bobish, you can go deeper in it as you start to talk about philosophy. Eric Fromm, very interesting. But what do you think about those basic values that were like coming
Yeah.
from the original message from the hip hop in the United States?
Actually, you mentioned KRS-One Gospel of Hip Hop, and I was about I was also about to touch on that book because it was a big inspiration for me. When I first opened that book, it was a whole new world for me. And one of the core philosophical concepts of that book of KRS-One for me was the idea that everything is actually the other way around than it seems to be. So he tells there that in order to get jobs, to get hired, you have to start giving jobs and hire people, employ people yourselves on the block. So it's not that you run around the block and you're like, okay, I need a job, someone give me some money. It's the other way around. You want to give people money. You want to employ people. You want to help their careers. And through that, you will develop yourself as well. So that idea was absolutely mind-blowing for me, and it really changed my thinking enormously. This is one example. I'll touch one more. KRS-One in that book, he tells that idea of the idea of health, and he says, imagine that if you want to be healthy, imagine that you are already incredibly sick. You are super sick already. So what would your diet be? How would you breathe? How would you go about greeting the sun? How would you go about being happy, seeing the water? How would you drink that water? How would you, what vegetables would you drink? Or would you just, continue hitting shots? Or would your habits change? So that idea of everything being inverted really impressed me, and I'm still into discovering how much is into that idea. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Bobish, so much. It's really a vital thing about the influence of the hip hop ideas and how they're circulating in the different, circle societies and how they're like interpreted. But it's interesting that you're sounding idea of the social well-being from the in terms of hip hop. So Rene, I know that you are doing in the Hip Hop Loves Foundation some classes, even connected with the hip hop meditation. I think it's very connected to what Bobish is saying. So that impact on health, on mental health, on the lives of different people. Can you just tell us a little bit more?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I feel like on a level like hip hop is a reflection of like our society. So when you look at certain things as far as like what's great, maybe what's not so great, and like when you listen to lyrics, like it's a reflection of what's going on in our world. So with that said, like what we've started to implement within some of our workshops, yeah, like even starting from I think 2013 or 14, we started doing our first yoga workshops with the students. And this is in Harlem. And this is not even heard of. And people are like, "You really want to do this? Like, you think it's gonna work?" We're like, "Yeah, let's try it. Let's see what people think." And the kids the students got into it, and it really changed the difference. Like, there was a big different demeanor with the students in the building. So we still continue to do that. We started doing meditation, which is great, hip hop meditation, and now we opened up a center in Rio de Janeiro in one of the favelas called Heineken. So now we're introducing actually doing therapy sessions with students. So that's something that's very important. Like mental health is something that, in a lot of societies, that is not discussed as much. I mean, like in New York, even in the streets, a lot of people that deal with it. Even people from and even any socio-economical level, whether you have a lot of money to no money, there are people who deal with this all the time, and they don't address it. I know sometimes in a Black community, some people tell you, if you got an issue, figure it out yourself. You don't need, people who deal with therapy are supposed to be crazy or lunatics, and which is totally a fallacy. It's not true. People need to nourish, just like you nourish yourself, your body, you got to nourish your mind too. You nourish your spirit. So it's all connected. So same thing like with hip hop. So that's why we just implemented all of that together, and we feel like you have to have all these things connected, like your chakras and all that stuff, to be able to function and be successful.
Yeah, thank you, Rene, so much. So I'm passing this question also to Anton. Maybe one more time, we've been talking about the concept of peace, love, and unity and having fun, but then we went forward to the social, some positive impact of hip hop philosophy to the audience, to the crowd, to your crew, maybe.
Of course, I think we all know peace, unity, and having fun. But I think back in the days, in the early 80s, in old New York, unfortunately, they got a really high criminal level. I mean, murders and a robbery in the streets, especially in the ghetto, where the hip hop was created and was spread in the biggest part. I mean, unfortunately, it occasionally back in the days wasn't cooperate with the really I don't know, people which was involved in hip hop, but the truth is and the point is that the peace and having fun, and like we have all friends, and maybe many people making family inside the community of hip hop, maybe crews and maybe friends, and of course we are helping to each other. And I would like to emphasize, like Babish said about the KRS-One, and I really love KRS-One because he's really he paying a lot of attention to the knowledge, to the education, instead of making money, and that's one of the crucial point in hip hop. And I don't know, one of my favorite quotes of KRS-One, and it's like me, I got no jewels on my neck. Why I don't need it? I get your respect, because he underscored that instead of, I don't know, many hip hoppers, rappers who is wearing, neck. He don't need it because he got the respect, and I don't know. Since that time, I heard that quote. Maybe even before. I don't like gold really. Even I don't have my ring, but kind of like that. So, and I would like also would like to say when we started, and breakdance was really affordable. You need for breakdance, you really need the clothes. That's all, and maybe sneakers, and your desire to dance, to create something. So instead of, I don't know, baseball, you don't need a bat, you don't need a field and stuff like that, which costs a lot of money. Yeah, so that's my point.
Yeah, thank you, Anton. Thank you so much. And that's very good point. Just talking about, some positive impacts on spirituality, some community organizing and making work. And at the same time, we can look at the industry, how it was building from the ground zero. And now what we see, like hip hop is everywhere in ads, and, everybody's using like rap music. It's huge worldwide. And it's interesting for me to know about that, entrepreneurship messages that are coming or may not coming from the United States. What do you think about it? How, that entrepreneurship flow, let's call it so, influencing our communities here in Russia, for instance, or worldwide? What do you think about it? Or maybe Bobish, you can start.
Yeah, that's a really, really tough question, and it's a long question too. I think that definitely there is a lot to look into this, and there is a lot to research, because in a lot of places in the United States, there are really complex models, complex economical models of how people deal with profit. It's not only one-way street. People organized an event, made some money, and that's that. The hosts stay with their money, and that's the end of the story. This is not like this, and unfortunately, a lot of people sometimes understand it only as one-way street. Whereas I met a lot of people, for example, Sacramento, California. Flexible Flav crew, a lot of interesting concepts of how people raise funds for the events. a lot of interesting concepts of how people share the profits, a lot of interesting concepts of how people even save for the next events starting 1 year earlier. And I think this all to be somehow maybe even researched in terms of texts and be put into some textual form that people can start to learn from the experiences from one another, and try to make the thinking, our thinking process about the economy models more complicated and not just plain simple as one-way street. Okay, we got the cash, that's done. Forget about the event, forget about the community, just be happy with that cash. Yeah, so in a lot of the places it's way more complicated, and I think that's a cool thing to learn.
Yeah, thank you, Bobish. I totally agree with you that there is a kind of a lack of, scientific investigation of such processes are happening, especially in the music industry, in the show business, particularly. But I'm just trying to split that what you're saying like into two categories. It's just when you're earning something out of what you're doing, of your like show, of your music, of what you're doing, and the second layer is like a bit deeper of that, hidden economics, hidden relations between people that are influencing communities, and there's a certain processes that can be happening like not just here and now, but happening like in a way far more long terms, like 10 years or 20 years, and you have to invest some money or some forces to the processes that are happening on the social level now, to see the results in the far future, like in the 20 years, in the 30 years, or your kids only be, dealing with the results of that. So maybe Renee, you can elaborate a little bit more about that.
Sure. It's a layered situation. It's a layered conversation. And, like to say what Bob used to say, yeah, this is a whole this could be a whole channel in itself, like that good conversation. But kind of make it short. I think hip hop, has created a lot of entrepreneurs, people who, didn't maybe have necessary education and things like that, has made multimillionaires, has made, people be able to do things, people who might have criminal records and things of that nature who wouldn't have gotten a regular job, couldn't get a regular job, but now, are able to provide for their family and actually even creating generational wealth. I think that's something, within a lot of communities now, people are trying to figure out how to create generational wealth through this. Like you have industries, how people who started, like, for example, a Jay-Z, who was a drug dealer, who decided, okay, I'm going to make albums. Now I've created this, I'm a billionaire. I've created all these different levels of like streams of income, from beverages to clothing to art to all these real estate, all this stuff. Like, to a person like Akon, who now took the money he's created from hip hop and is creating a whole community in Africa and helping to add and create electricity, and provide electricity to people who don't have electricity in Africa. You have people like Dead Prez and like Styles P, who focus on health, that create these companies now that are helping you to be fit. Going back to the other question of being physically fit and spiritually fit, making sure you eat right and do these things to, if you're getting into like events like maybe festivals of breakdance and stuff like that, on the grassroots level, yeah, I mean, I think there's levels of like trying to understand like how to make this more sustainable. Like, if it's not for profit, like how to apply for grants, how to get grants to make your stuff sustainable, creating these game plans and even collaborations, to understand how to, make these things. Like, sometimes people are taking something from one section, like, okay, I made this money from recording albums, but I'm going to take some of this money and now we're going to start this clothing company, or now we're going to start this other venture, and learning about that. So yeah, I think it should be kind of an interesting thing to get some research on like how to build that, and how, and like a hip hop economics class, basically. I think that could be something that could be pretty interesting, and put it on different subset levels on the tiers of the pillars of hip hop. How do you be successful as a breakdance artist, a breaker, to be sustainable in life? I mean, because I think that's pretty cool too. Like, you have people like Crazy Legs, who just retired like last week, but he's been doing this for like like 4 decades, and he's made a living out of it. How do you do that? So it's interesting.
Yeah, thank you, Renee. Maybe one day we have to issue a kind of investigation, a kind of brochure, a small book or whatever. But
Yeah,
we definitely have to think about it. So
absolutely.
you're welcome, Anton, also to share your thoughts about this issue.
Well, that's one of the, I think, difficult question. Of course, many artists, I mean, from amongst hip hop artists now and I mean, back in the days, turned. How can I say? Sorry. I mean, it's difficult. Can you repeat the particular question? I missed the, I don't know, essence.
So maybe we can switch it like to the mode of entrepreneurship, making business out of hip hop, and how it influencing your community, and how it was like in the United States, and what you can like reshape and take it out to your sphere.
Yeah, all right. I see. As for me, it affect to, I don't know, how can I say, to quality of music. Like maybe from the middle of 2000s, a rap became to turn, I don't know, to R&B style more. And for me, that's terrible because it's not a hip hop in itself, like back in the days, but it's what people want. I don't know, maybe kind of like fashion. But in 80s and in 90s as well, the hip hop was kind of clear, like we all imagined the hip hop in itself, and there wasn't any, I don't know, any bullshit tracks and stuff like that. But it's just what people, I don't know, demand. Yeah, kind of like that, and I don't like it. Yeah, but from the other hand, it requires b-boy artists, graffiti writers, and DJing, and it gives us and to other b-boys and other people, I don't know, basically or simply kind of workplaces, and that's the important thing. And unfortunately, if some people need to feed their family, maybe they don't like to do it, but they have to do it, unfortunately. Yeah, kind of like that.
Yeah, that conversation also comes to the question of a true school and show business, and that difference of the different layers, different attitudes. I would say that's and also like a huge and often question to everybody. And I remember while we've been in the United States in the Trinity College, we also got that conversation about that true school, old school, and new school, and that different attitudes in sense of perception, in sense of audience, in sense of entrepreneurship also. So it's like a huge huge thing, but I want also to underline for our audience, so if you have some questions, you are more than welcome to type it in your social media, and we'll see them in the chat. Maybe one more thing I would ask you regarding inspiration coming from hip hop, and thinking and talking about the new generations, the closest or the far future. Maybe you can think about your message for the new generation. Okay, Bobish, we can start with you, okay?
My message to the newer generation, I always say that it's very important to try to stay as long as possible in the culture, because if you are there for a couple of months, you don't get to see anything. Yes, so a couple of years, still not much. Yes, so a decade is probably like a good starting point to start kind of like putting a little bit some puzzles together. So I would say yes, try to stay in the culture as long as possible. Just find fresh stuff for you. If you began with one element and it got boring, or maybe, for example, you're not you got injured and you can't participate in dance anymore, switch to another element, but try to stay inside the community, try to keep the connections that you build so that you maintain the connections for your whole life and not lose them because you can't participate in the original element you started with.
Oh, nice, nice words. So I'm passing microphone to you, Renee.
All right, there we go. That mic. Yeah, I think one for if a message would be to, I think with any type of industry that you get into, is like related to hip hop, learn about how it evolved. Like learn about get to the core of like how it got here. Like learn about like some of the history around hip hop. Like like some of the the people who started it to get into it. And we're in a technology age, so it's not like that hard that you really have to go dig. Like you can just ask some questions on Google and start just reading about it. I do add what Babish was saying. More sustainability. Like learn about more stuff. About it. I mean, I feel like right now everything is very much it's like going back to like this anniversary. Everything's very rap oriented, like more MC oriented when it's coming to hip hop. Like, and that's what I'm saying. Maybe learn a little bit more about how this evolved, and learn about like how even the people who you might admire, some of these artists like Busta Rhymes and people like that, they still do connect to the hip hop culture. If you really have a conversation or you listen to some interviews, we'll talk about how they used to breakdance, how this and that. So learn a little bit more about it. But I feel like stay in your lane and do what you like to do with it, and enjoy it and embrace it. But but give back to it, as much as you give into it, give back as well.
Oh,
I added one more thing actually. I'd say it's also very, very important to remember that hip hop in itself, it's the easiest thing to do because it's so affordable. You don't need anything, you can start right away. But at the same time, it's also the hardest thing to do because look at scratching techniques. It's like it's a whole table of different scratch styles, scratch elements. Look at breaking, no comments. Look at rap flows. Look at graffiti. If you bomb the streets, what can be harder? So hip hop, that's important thing to remember. It's the easiest thing to do, but also the hardest thing to do. So no no easy path.
Yeah, I agree totally with you, Bobish. And I remember in one slide from Murray's presentation about DIY thing, about that big bottle and that drum making out of it, and that's really all about it. Yeah, you can do out of nothing. Yeah, I remember it was like a movie named with the same name, like something out of nothing. It was the huge documentary about hip hop culture. So I'm passing microphone to you, Anton.
Yep. I think my message is be yourself, and in graffiti and in the breakdance and in rap. Don't try to, I don't know, copy another character. Don't see at anybody else. Just be yourself and creating your person. So you can be something. You only can be yourself. And that's the first point. And the second point I want to bring up is respect the other brothers from community. It doesn't matter whether the b-boys or b-girls is from your crew or from another crew. And unfortunately, after, I don't know, 15 or to 20 years already, we missed that point, because if you see a lot of old events like from the late 90s, like even the Battle of the Year, many b-boys from the competitors' crew club to each other, and it doesn't matter it's a b-boy from your crew or from other crew, and they will always support any b-boys, and unfortunately, nowadays at the I don't know at the events, many b-boys doing really difficult moves and difficult tricks and flavors and stuff like that, and the other people and the crowd like,
Yes.
that's great, and that's difficult.
Yeah, thank you, Anton, so much. We're going to the end of this conversation. I'm looking at the timing. Maybe the very final thing from myself, I would say, so I would advise you to find the passion to do that, the real passion to find your motivation, and at the same time to get the true inspiration to have fun to have fun dealing with the hip-hop culture. That's the main thing to my mind. So I'm thanking everybody taking part in this nice conversation. Time running really fast. It was just like this 1 hour pass, and I'm thanking you so much, Lev, Bobish, and Yonton. I see that Rene has already switched off, unfortunately, but I will send a message to him. So I'm thanking our technical crew for everybody just giving us this opportunity to make this inspirational session about 50 years celebration of hip hop culture. I'm underlining this one more time. There's a great date to celebrate. So thank you for watching us. I hope that this video will be recorded for those who was not participating to reach it in the internet. So thank you everybody to having us online.
Peace.
Peace to everyone. So while we're online, maybe we can do a little bit more. It was a really huge conversation today, and I really love, Bobish, your thesis about that philosophical Eric Fromm's definitions. And it's really interesting to me how it is connected with the spirituality. And maybe you can elaborate a little bit more and telling us about your classes on philosophy and breaking, as I remember you've been doing so like 5 or years ago or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So getting back to that thing. Yes, actually, the Hip Hop Library project of Moscow and of Petersburg, we had a lot of interesting presentations, and all the people who are on vk.com, you're very welcome to check out the Hip Hop Library groups there, because there are a lot of presentations and information in there. And a particularly cool, interesting presentation about possibilities of developing careers out of breaking. So we tried to look at the element of breaking with the idea that it can help you to start your career in many directions. You can be a photographer, you can record videos, you can edit videos, you can organize events, you can, as I did, you can translate events. So what we tried to do, we tried to show the parents that it's not only about jumping on your hand or spinning on your head, it's also a lot about trying to distinguish all the possible career paths that are incorporated into that community thing. Because first of all, it's a social thing. It's you can't b-boy or b-girl alone in a vacuum. It's always about communicating to people, cheering for your fellow dancers, appreciating them appreciating your skills. So it's always about those little community things, and only then about moves. So yes, go ahead and check hip hop library groups and check out those presentations. A lot about philosophy, a lot about hip hop related to classic concepts of philosophy, even from Hegel. We got stuff like that there as well. So hip hop library, yes, much love to that organization as well.
Wow, yeah, so nice, nice. Thank you, Babish, so much. So thank you one more time. It was really nice conversation. Uh, so some guys outside of our online telling me that we have already stopped the broadcasting.
Oh, okay.
As I got it right, as I got it right. So thank you one more time. It was super insightful, deep, and intriguing for me. I love kind of conversations like that. Many things that we can also discuss and cover, maybe in some other sessions. So we only touch the ground. We only started to discover the sources of inspiration to talk about hip hop 50 years celebration, so we can do that more and more. And yes, thank you, Bobish, for mentioning hip hop library. We're having a number of books, a number of issues, documentaries, videos, documents, everything there. So if someone wanting to dig in deeper, so you're more than welcome. That's it. So
Yay,
thank you.
happy birthday.
Happy birthday, hip hop.
Happy birthday, hip hop.
Yeah, okay.
Let's go celebrate.
I don't know. We're still having our, yeah.